Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today in person and also online via Zoom. I hope you are all doing well. I am Razan Bourghol. I'm the head of program at Beitna Civil Society Organization, a long-time partner of the Syrian Network for Human Rights, and I will be moderating today's discussion session. So the purpose of this session is to explore the newly published report, Unshakable Voices, and to shed the light on the major challenges and grave human rights violations experienced by women in the context of the Syrian conflict, and also to get some updates from our speakers today who are going to hopefully share with us updates about their efforts in this regard. So we have today an exciting lineup of speakers, as we said, who will be sharing with us their insights and expertise. So before we delve into the discussion, let me introduce them. So we have with us here Ala Al-Jizawi, a Syrian women activist and arrest and enforced disappearance survivor. We have also Kathryne Bomberger. Sorry, I'm pronouncing it in Dutch. Director General at International Commission on Missing Persons, ICMP. And Marie Forestier, Senior Syria Advisor at the European Institute of Peace. Nicole Shaya, who's visiting us from Beirut. Gender focal point at the Civil Society and Technical Cooperation Unit of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, or SNHR. And of course, we have Fadl Abdelghani, the Executive Director of the Syrian Network for Human Rights. So actually, each of our speakers brings today a unique perspective and wealth of experience to the discussion today. So I encourage you all to actively listen and engage and take advantage of the opportunity to gain valuable insights from their side. And one final thing before we start, I just want to emphasize that this is a safe space. We value your diverse perspectives. And therefore, throughout the event, or maybe at the end of the event, we will dedicate some time for questions and discussions from your end. So please take a note of any questions you may have for the speakers, and as we will open the floor for a Q&A after their presentations. So once again, thank you all for joining us, and without further ado, let's kick off our event and turn the spotlight to our speakers. With Fadl, who will be presenting the report, Unshakable Voices, and sharing with us some information about the methodology and the key findings.
It's working, start off. Okay. Thank you very much, Razan. And thanks for our audience for coming and for your time. Before I present the report, I would like to speak a little bit, not that much, about maybe briefly about SNHR and why is this report? Why is this report? So SNHR have been documenting numerous human rights violations in Syria since June 2011 on daily basis. And based on that, we published a news reporting on human rights violation in Syria to gain a swift action, which is the core of human rights. Then a statement, then we have monthly report, we have annual report, and we have also a thematic report based on the data analyzing. SNHR has become a primary source for civil entities in the United Nations, like UNICEF, OHCHR, Commission of Inquiry, Triple IM and others, and also the working group on enforced disappearances and many special reparators. SNHR also is a primary source for many countries on their human rights situation on Syria, including Netherlands, Denmark, Germany, UK, France, USA, and others. So on the woman issue, we used to have this distinction toward women to record the violation against the female, so the children and the adults, on almost like every day. And we built a specific database of those violations. So for years, we used to publish a dedicated and specialized report on the violation against women. Especially, we have 2 annual reports on the violations against women. But in all of our other reports, we include the women. So it's a genuine issue in our strategy, women and children. So what is now, why this, the question, why is this report? So despite of those countless dangerous violations against the Syrian women, all of which have brought their own massive challenges, both at the time and in their long-term efforts, we have been humbled by immense courage and inner strength shown by the women we have interviewed. As such, this report is an attempt to shine a light on the most notable challenges faced by the Syrian women, who continue, despite all they have endured, to play a key role in their struggle for freedom and dignity, achieving in the process some outstanding success stories. This is the report is talking about. All of those years, we focused on the violation, but despite, I'll present some of those challenging and violation especially in the Syria context, which outstanding, some of them systematic, amount to be crimes against humanity, especially in torture, disappearance, forced displacement, and others. But what is draw our attention that there is a success story despite all of that. So this report will provide a number of first-hand accounts from Syrian women who have played a unique and prominent role in the service of their community, despite being brutalized by the Syrian regime monster machine of arbitrary arrest, torture, sexual violence, and enforced disappearance. All because of dynamic, constructive role they have played since the beginning of popular uprising, since March 2011. So because of their role in the uprising and engagement in this process, they've been subjected. Sometimes they've been targeted solely because they are women. We used to document all parties, and that's what I will explain later. So to that end, this report focused particularly on the horrendous that these women have faced and how they have endured some extraordinary circumstances following to their release. So all of those are survival from those types of violations and challenging. So from the start, the Syrian woman played an instrumental and pivotal role as a partner in their popular uprising and the progress toward political change on the road of democracy. Syrian women have their legacy in uprising through their active participation, especially politically and Some of them are human rights defender, media activists, and social activists as well. So I'll start presenting a little bit from the report methodology, first of all, how we build the report, and then the outcome of the report. And I'll leave the stories for Ala because she's here to handle this part as one of those amazing women who succeed in spite of all of the violation they are subjected to. So Unshakable Voices, this is the report about it. So Syrian women who overcome the trauma of detention and tribulation following their release. So the continent, the first paragraph I spoke about it, so I will little bit jump in due to the time, but I would like to speak about, as a researcher, little bit about our methodology. So we at SNHR used to take in account, and here I highlight some points because the methodology is long, and also we have our general methodology, which is also maybe 40 pages. So I want to just highlight few points in the methodology. So we used to take in our account the gender-based context that exists in most of types of violation perpetrated against women. So the context is very essential, even if similar types of violation have been found to be committed against all civilians. So there is little bit of sensitivity when the violation committed against the woman. Because sometimes when we spoke to the woman, they have been targeted solely because of their sex. So this report draw upon interviews occurred by Syrian Network for Human Rights with female survivor of arbitrary arrest and torture. In the process of conducting those interviews, we took into consideration a wide range of criteria, and that's the core of the methodology. So including geographical and cultural difference, so to have this wide range of outcome, and the specific role or position held by each of the interviews. We have also tried to select a wide variety as possible of interviews from different areas, actors in Syria. The other criteria is that those survival from different governorates, so geopolitically distributed, also from Homs, Hama, Latakia, Whole Damascus, Rif Damashq, Damascus, Deir ez-Zor, and Sueda. Some of those women have sought asylum in Europe, while others live in Turkey, and some of them are still inside Syria. So we will highlight different pivotal moments and on their inspirational journey and the challenges they faced. I will jump because this there is a lot of criteria, and the report is on our will publish on our website. Okay. So the report primarily focused on the violation perpetrated by the Syrian regime. We included the figures we documented of violation by all parties. This is the first report, and why we focus on the Syrian regime, because the Syrian regime, by far the first and the foremost party responsible for these violations, and we'll present the percentage. But we are working on the next stage, the next report, which will handle and provide more details on the other parties as well. So we present 8 amazing stories for women who engage in the uprising. But we thought that this is not enough. We need to show the pattern of challenges. So what we did actually, we go back to hundreds or maybe thousands of interviews. We take it since 2011 and review those and pick up based on other criteria 170 cases, because we want to show or to present the pattern of what is those women, what the challenges those women faced. So what is those criteria? Because I want to jump into the outcome of the report. So we choose who's been forcibly disappeared by the Syrian regime forces for over 6 months, and where those women were arrested because they were specifically pursued and targeted for their involvement in various aspects of peaceful activism. The interviews also selected features women who have been put in trial by exceptional court. So some of those cases we choose it, they've been referred to the exceptional court. So we need to see what is those, what is the sentences in those and what is those exceptional court. So to obtain a better representation through those 170 interviews analysis, we ensure that the interviews with subjects from all Syrian governorates were included. So I will little bit jump in. So our goal actually to represent a wide spectrum of the experience and transformation that women undergo following their release. So the report draws upon material also from our database. Those statistics which the report is showing are not an estimated figure. We don't have such thing. So those are data recorded by names, the date of arrest, location, some photos of those ladies, different types of details. Where is this? Who is the center detention arrest these ladies? Our database contain who still, the figure in the report present the ladies who still disappeared or arbitrary arrest. But we know that we have other database who's been subjected to arbitrary arrest and been released. So there is this differentiation. So also the report incorporate a legal approach in tackling the various affecting that for sure, including protection and other issues. And here some definitions I will jump in because like especially the exceptional court, what do we mean by that? Especially the counter-terrorist court, we refer to our huge report on the counter-terrorist court and the field court, which abolished by the Syrian regime recently. What is those court? How is this? How is they are functioning? Lack of the most basic standard for justice. There is no lawyer. This, and actually we used to use this the term arbitrary arrest, but this is type of abduction. Actually, it's not at all arbitrary arrest. It's more than abduction. And the referral to this court, speak little bit briefly, come from the security forces, not from the judge. So the referral and all of those being taken under that is being taken under the or seized there, the sentences based on the provided information seized from based on torture. And here we speak a little bit about security apparatus. So I jump now to the third paragraph, which we present all of this introduction is essential to highlight in spite of, I think, this exceptional and Syria being exceptional comparing to other countries around the world by the level of violence against the women, who's died due to torture, who still disappeared, who been displaced. And in spite of that, actually we shocked. We working in this field since 13 years, and we shocked by those success stories in spite of all of that. So it's essential before to present the stories, to present the violation and the challenging the Syrian woman faced. So the woman who's still arrested by all parties, still detained, and this about 10,200. And we used to disturb to do this distribution based on the party. And this is the Syrian regime. This is the percentage. This is the armed opposition group. This is the SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces, the PYD, and this is ISIS. Those are still disappeared in spite ISIS being gone for years, but we are unable to reveal the fate of those women. And this is by Hayat Tahrir Sham. So if we move ahead, we used to present also this cumulative chart to present the figures and how is this being escalated. And that little bit we are holding the international community the responsibility not to be success to fighting the impunity, especially of such crimes against humanity being committed against the Syrian woman in Syria. And to show a little bit of analysis on our database, so this is all parties, and we take party by party to distribute these figures also based on the year. So this is the all parties. And this we're showing that 2013 was the worst year. And this is here we distribute the figures geographically. And in each geographic area, we distribute the figures based on the perpetrator. Our database enable us to do that. And of course, we can do even more analysis and deep, but that's this level is enough. And now here we move to the woman who've been died or killed due to torture. And this is a shocked figures. 115 women died in center detention due to torture, 95 by the Syrian regime and 14 by ISIS. These 2 by the opposition group and 2 by SDF. This is if we are unable to sometimes determine who's the perpetrator, we have this category, which is the other party. And similar, we distribute this based on the year and based on the perpetrator. And here geographically. And here we some of those women who died due to torture their fate been released to us by the civil registry. So we have also death statement assure that those women died. This civil registry is a long story. I maybe can speak a little bit about it in the question, but also we have 4 reports on our website explaining this phenomenon. And those are the women who died due to torture and being shown in the Caesar photo, the famous one. So we are able to recognize 11 women, one of them, and we use to distribute this based on the year. And here we present the sexual violence against the woman. Same. I will move because I don't know how. 10 minutes remaining. I'll little bit move faster. So the effect faced by women following their arbitrary arrest. This is also here we present the based on 170 interviews. What is the effects faced those women? So our database that 4,842 women arrested by the Syrian regime, and here we'll present the 170 interviews analysis I spoke about it. So so those are 14 types of violations. Those are the pattern. This is the outcome, the main outcome of the report. One of the main outcome of the report, the success stories. So what is those actually? So resummoned by the Syrian security forces and subjected to security authority persecution. And here explanation a little bit. I cannot read it because there is like 14 types. So I will just highlight only the title. But those women been maybe 2 or 3 times being recalled by the security authority after their release. So being deprived of the civil rights, civil deprivation, being detained or denied, being denied from education, being unfairly dismissed from government jobs. And under each one, we little bit have this explanation. So their family being subjected to persecution by security authorities, being intimidated and harassed at checkpoints, their name being distributed at the checkpoint, properties being reserved or seized. Mario will explain on this very dangerous issues because the exceptional court, their sentence being include this seizing properties, excluded from public sector jobs opportunities. So not only the government denying their jobs, but even the private sector. Private sector, like they are afraid to hire those women. So what they're going to do? So even being banned from traveling, forbidden to travel or to leave the country, being separated from their families, experience social stigmatization, face difficulties in obtaining official papers. This is like also, maybe Nicola will highlight this point. Lack access to all forms of supports. And what does that lead to? Lead to be the only option they have to leave the country and to be forcibly displaced. They cannot survive in all of those challenges. Here is the stories the report is talking about, and I leave this paragraph to my colleague Ala to talk about those. This is the report is presenting. I'm very proud about those women who succeed in their life in spite of all what we present, and very humble. And in those story, to be frank with you, also we eliminate little bit because we always care about their security, so the story can be even bigger. So this is Naama, Ala, that was us, and all of those extraordinary women. So Ala, all of those stories, Hala Hassa, and Ruba. Nibal, Amira. This is the core and the spirit of the report. And this is finally the conclusion and the recommendation. If we have time, I will speak about it. Finally, I would like to thank our team, especially Noor. She worked hardly on the report, Noor Khatib, and she's the one who took those stories. She's supposed to be with us. Also, 6 women, exclude me, the only ugly face sitting on the edge. So I prefer that, but unfortunately, she is unable to come. I would like also to thank Ryan, who's like working on building the database, and my colleague Bayan, she also worked on the report, and Khulud, the designer. And yeah, thanks for your time. To you, Raza.
Thank you, Fadl. Thank you very much, and for the Syrian Network for Human Rights for this valuable report and the informative presentation from your side as well. So now to Ala, just to complete what Fadl has started in presenting the report, and we don't mean by any means to ask you to relive the trauma, but at the same time, it's very important to share with us your story, your experience, just to keep remind us about all the challenges, all the suffering, everything you had to go through, and also to know from you what do you think about the future? How does future look for Ala, who suffered from arrest and enforced disappearance, who survived arrest and enforced disappearance? So the floor is yours. I just want to kindly note that interpretation is available via the Zoom link. So because Ala is going to speak in Arabic, I will try and Fadl to yeah, help her in translation. But in case our interpretation was not that good, you can join the you can join the Zoom link. Ala.
مرحبا، اسمي آلاء، عمري 31 سنة. كمان من حمص. اعتقلت ب 2012 8/11. كنت بالشام بوقتها عم اشتغل مع راسي للناس النازحين، فهذا كان سبب اعتقالي. بدأ التعذيب أو الضرب من الشارع. بوقتها كنت بجسر الرئيس عند وكالة سانا. وخلص بس هن يعني شافوا الهوية وبلشوا وقتها ضرب بالشارع، وبعدها أخذوني على فرع 215. أول ضرب كان بالفرع من رئيس الفرع لأنه كان معي مصاري، وكان موبايلي أحسن من موبايله، فهو بنظره إنه هاي مصاري عم ياخدها مظاهرات. وبعدها كان تعذيب من رئيس السجن اللي هو أجبرني إنه هو يفتشني. فكان عندي خيارين، يا هو بفتشني يا إما بفوت عناصر 5 6 فتشوني. بعدها كان تعذيب من أول محقق بشوفه جوا الفرق. فكان بالكبلات على رجلي عم يضربني. طبعا هون هني ما بيعرفوا لا مين أنا لا شو، بس اسمي. آه، تحرش فيا. فأنا فت لجوا وصرت أحكي للسجانين، أحكي للبنات شو صار معي. فما بقى شفتوا لهذا المحقق. بعدها صار في عندي محقق تاني، طبعا بعد عدة أيام هذا الحكي. بقي تقريبا ساعة أو ساعة ونص هو بس مقعدني، مخبي لي عيوني. أنا بس عم أسمع كيف هو عم يمشي وإذا رح يضربني ولا لأ. فهون طلع هو عم يطعمي العصافير تبعوته وعنده إياه أسلوب تعذيب. فهون حسيت إنه لأ، الضرب أسهل من الواحد يفكر إنه بده ينضرب. هذا المحقق كان بده يعني اعترف على تفجير القزاز بالشام. وكان عن طريق إنه هو يهددني بنشر صوري بلا حجاب، صور ماما وخواتي. فطبعا أنا رفضت. وبعد كم يوم بصمني على تقريبا 10 أوراق. لا لا، ما بعرف شو على شو بصمني. وبعدها نقلوني على أمن العسكري بحمص. وهناك كان الوضع أسوأ بكتير. كانت أول مرة بشوف رجال عم يتعذبوا. بالشام كنا نسمع الأصوات بس بحمص شفنا. كانوا رجال معلقين هيك بساحة كبيرة لابسين بس داخلة، ودم يعني دم على ظهرهم أسود أزرق. بوقتها استقبلوني بقتلي من قسم القلم. لأنه كانوا عم يتفرجوا على الجزيرة وكان في وحدة منقبة بحامل سلاح، فإنه هي أنا. فضربوني إنه إنه هي أنا يعني ضربوني بدالها. بعدها كان تفتيش من قبل وحدي، بس بعدين عرفت إنه هاي الوحدة متفقة معهم بحيث إنه نوقف مكان والكل يشوفونا. تاني يوم من اعتقالي، أو من وصولي لهذا الفرع، تقريبا على أذان المغرب. إجوا قالوا لي جهزي حالك، يعني البسي كلبشات. والقماشة، وعلقوني شبحوني تقريبا من أذان الفجر لأذان الصبح. بدون ولا أي سؤال. تاني يوم رجعوا عملوا نفس الشيء، وبدهم إني أعترف إني أنا فجرت تفجيرين بحمص. وهن أصلا صاروا وقت اللي أنا كنت معتقلة. فطبعا كمان رفضت، وبصمت على أوراق أنا لهلأ ما بعرف شو هي. بقيت 63 يوم معتقلة، وطلعت بمبادلة أسرى إيرانيين. تاني يوم من خروجي عرفت إنهم رجعوا ياخدوا العالم اللي طلعوا بهاي المبادلة. واضطريت إني أطلع من سوريا. أنا آسفة، بس ابني أول مرة بيعرف هذا الحكي، فأنا ما عم أقدر كتير فوت بتفاصيل. عم يشوفنا هو.
So let us speak a little bit about life after prison. No more, no more life in prison. After you left Syria, and how did you overcome what happened to you? Did you overcome what happened to you? Have you? How does life look to you now?
هلا ما بتوقع إنه في أي سوري بشكل عام عايش طبيعي، وبالذات اللي كان معتقل. يعني أنا بحس حالي إن أنا صنيعة تجربة الاعتقال، شخصيتي هي صنيعة الاعتقال. أم، عندي استعداد إنهي علاقتي بأي شخص ممكن يسألني أي سؤال، لأنه بكره الأسئلة. ما أنتبه. أي سؤال إنه وينك، مع مين عم تحكي، وين رايحة، فأنا بحسه تحقيق. آه، البانيك أتاك هاي مدافعتنا. ما هلأ قررت مؤخرا إني أهرب من الأخبار. ما بقى أشوف أخبار، لأنه حل ما أظن في حل.
So, in relation to your life here, your new life here, is it a new life? What are you doing? What are your plans for the future? Tell us about the new Ala here, the new life, so to speak.
بصراحة أنا هلأ تركيزي كله على أولادي. بس
One final question. I know you hate
No.
questions.
it's okay.
Just before we move to Nicole, what are, like, based on your experience and everything you just openly shared with us now, what are the main needs in relation to, like, the long-term healing process, like the psychological support, or is there anything can be provided in this regard? And I'm not talking about Ala, but Ala and who she represents now. What are the needs from your own perspective and your own experience in relation to those women's needs on the long-term healing process?
أكيد كلياتنا بحاجة علاج نفسي، الكل. بس ما أنا وصلت لمرحلة بحس ما بقى في شيء بيساعدنا إلا مقاضاة النظام. عنا أملين، البنات يطلعوا والنظام يتحاسب. أظن هذا علاجنا.
Thank you, Ala. Thank you very much, and sorry for asking a lot of questions.
No.
And I hope next time we meet and next time we share updates and ask questions, the answers would be happier, and bring some closure to all of us. So moving to you, Nicole, and of course, because I think Ala's experience have highlighted some critical issues related to women's experiences in detention and the systematic human rights violations experienced by women in the context of the conflict, any conflict, and here we are talking specifically about Syria. So from your own perspective at the OHCHR, and you as a gender focal point, so what information and updates about your efforts can you share with us today? Please. You have it. I don't think it's working. Use.
Okay. It should be okay. That's one. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you, Razan. And thank you for the lovely introduction. I would like first to say that we are really honored and we are happy to be here with you and to be invited to this event. So thank you so much, Fadil, and thank you so much, SNHR, for this. And thank you for you all to be here with us and to give us the opportunity to listen to you. And thank you, Ala, for sharing your experience. I imagine that it's a very hard thing to do, to share such a traumatizing experience. And we are happy that you are here with us. Being this lovely lady, as I was saying, we have a lot of respect and admiration to you and to all women who went through this experience and suffered like that from these atrocious violations to your rights and your person. And so as being the representative of OHCHR Syria office more specifically, and being the gender focal point, there's a lot of issues that we address as OHCHR regarding human rights violations, but more specifically, women's rights violations. And following the reports that you spoke about, Fadil, and the exhaustive information that you've put there, and the effort, it shows the effort that was made and the time that you have put into doing this amazing report, we found ourselves as the United Nations and OHCHR having also this obligation towards you and towards the international community to bring forward information regarding women's violations on the international level, but also as Syria office, the effort that we try to do to monitor and report and document women's violations inside the territory of Syria, and also to talk more about the accountability system at the United Nations, which is the question that always haunts us all, to know how can people responsible for those violations be held accountable for their actions and for these violations. So as we start off talking about the impact of the conflict in Syria on women specifically, we have a lot of violations, human rights violations on women. And here we can talk about displacement. We talk about missing persons. We talk about torture, as you have mentioned, Fadil, and also Razan and Ala. And here as the United Nations, we try to monitor those violations, to document them, and to try to find ways how to address them, especially in the international community, but also with all of you, the civil society organizations and the Syrian community overall. And as we speak more about displacement, for example, and based on the resolution from the General Assembly in 2021, it addresses the big number of displacement, like 5.6 million refugees were displaced outside of their country, and more than half of them are women, which talks very much about the impact of the displacement specifically on women, because they are leaving their country. Sometimes they are leaving their loved ones behind, their family members, and they have to flee the country to protect their children. So here we find the Syrian women living in this traumatizing experience and trying as much as she can to stand up on her feet and say, I can move on. So OHCHR Syria office looks at it in this point of view and try as much as it can to address it the best possible way. And here, when we talk about displacement, there's also the issue of the returnees, which was addressed recently. And here we find that Syrians are being forcibly returned to Syria and not voluntarily. And even if it seemed to be a voluntary return to Syria, actually it is not, because there's a lot of inside reasons that push sometimes Syrians, and more specifically, I talk about women Syrian who are going back to the country because of so many other reasons. And here I share with you the first report that OHCHR Syria office published, which was yesterday, on the discrimination against returnees. And it focuses a lot on the suffering of women, Syrian women who are forced to go to the Syrian territory. And here we shed the light also on a specific aspect of the returnees and the women who return to their country. And it's not just they are forced to return because of the government, for example, or because of other authorities or other decisions. Most of the time, they are being forced to return to their country by their male members of the family, asking them to go back to the territory of Syria in order to test the waters and see what is the status of their relatives, husbands, fathers, cousins, brothers, what is their status inside the country. So here the woman, and sometimes with her children, is taking all this risk to go back to Syria just to see how safe, for example, it is for her relatives to come back. And here it causes, and it has a lot of impact on the women, and it causes a lot of violations to her rights by just going back to Syria. And this is what OHCHR Syria found as another form of gender-based violence against women, which is considered a very important violation that was not addressed before. And here also I would like to shed the light on the access to documentation, which also fell under the return of Syrian women to the country, because most of the time those displaced Syrian women have, for example, children outside their country, or they lost their documentation, or the documentation of their husbands and their relatives. And so here they are forced to go back to the Syrian territory and try to access these documentations from registers. And at this specific level that we all might think, by going to a register, what might happen? What could happen in a register? Well, you have no idea the number of violations that a woman go through by just stepping on the door of this register. She is under discrimination, gender-based violence, sexual exploitation, abuse, a whole bunch of human rights violations the woman has to endure just to get a piece of paper. And here OHCHR Syria office also sheds the light on this important issue. And if we also move to the missing persons, and here I'm just stating the impact of the Syrian conflict of women to end by the accountability system at the United Nations. And so here, if I may talk more about, for example, the disappeared, the missing persons. And here it's a major issue, in the Syrian context. And also it's a major issue at the office of OHCHR Syria, because as Fadl, you already mentioned, there's a huge number of people who have disappeared inside the detentions, the facilities, military facilities, in the prisons, and women, men, we are unable to know their fates and their whereabouts. And so this is also a very important issue to clarify, because it's not only that they are detained, it's that the government of Syria, for example, or other affiliated armed groups are just concealing the information, and there is no transparency in the records. And one day we know that this woman, for example, is detained here. The other day, we have no information about her. Or if we take the opposite side, one day a woman knows where her husband is. The next day, she doesn't know where he is, or if he is still alive. And this is torture by itself. And so here, OHCHR Syria office, based on the institutional complexity of the Syrian landscape, there was a need to create another international human rights mechanism. But this time it is focused on the Syrian context and focus on the Syrian missing people, which is the IIMP. IIMP stands for the Independent Institution for Missing Persons in Syria. And for the creation of this institution, the decision was made in the resolution in July 2023 by the General Assembly. And here we have the birth of a new mechanism for Syrian people to be able to get a hold of missing people. And not just that, because the mandate of this independent institution is actually, one, to determine and clarify the fate and whereabouts of the missing people in Syria. And second, this institution provides support, legal support, psychological support, and as much as it can, field support to the survivors, to the victims, but also to the families of the missing people. And here, as we talk about survivors, we talk about women. And when we talk about the family members, we are talking also about women. And when we talk about victims, we are also talking about women. And here we can find that women is everywhere. And it is very important to acknowledge that women are enduring a lot of violations, because women are a vulnerable group and subject to many transgression to their rights. And so it was very important for us to shed the light on this important issue. If I may just give you some information about this independent institution, other than its mandate and what it focuses on. So this institution is a startup institution, and from mid-2024, this institution will be fully operated, but with a small team. And then by the beginning of 2025, the institution will be fully operational. And if I may add just one thing about this institution, is that it is based on the principle of participation. And here it's very important for you to know that this institution is not just about a team working in its office and trying to help Syrian women or Syrians overall to know more about their missing or to give them support. It's about having survivors, victims, and family members to join the table with the independent institution and to share information and to share experiences. And so this independent institution, in order to prepare for its terms of reference, it's made a lot of consultations with human rights defenders, with activists, with women, civil society organizations, with women human rights defenders and activists, in order to draft the TORs. And up until now, if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't cleared, but it will be cleared soon enough. And if you would like, we could share with you all the information that I've just put on the table. And so this was very important because it's the creation of a future that we all aspire to. And this institution could be the beginning of a change, maybe, in in trying to figure out and trying to put some accountability for the missing persons in Syria, and more specifically to women. And here, if I may add to this, which is the accountability system that we all talk about. So here at the United Nations, we have two types of accountability systems. We have the charter-based, and we have the convention-based mechanisms. And here we talk about the treaty bodies, and we talk about the special procedures, the UPR, Universal Periodic Review, and we talk about other mechanisms which you can present to in order to present your complaints, which you can send your reports to. And OHHR Syria office has been actively working with different civil society organizations and human rights defenders, women human rights defenders more specifically, to submit their shadow reports, to be part of informal briefing with the Human Rights Council. Also for the UPR midterm report, OHHR Syria office organized on Monday a briefing session just to provide you with all technical help that we can provide in order to help you submit your report for the UPR midterm. Because the UPR midterm report, or basically the Universal Periodic Review, as you see it, it's a peer-to-peer procedure. So it's between states and another state. And the reports that you submit as human rights defenders or civil society organizations have a very big impact on the image of the situation in Syria and the government in Syria to the other member states, which would help us have recommendations and specific recommendations on women's rights and the violations to women's rights. And we can show this true picture to the world. And this is why, as OHHR Syria office, we invite you and we encourage you to submit your reports, because it is very important to know how essential it is and how important it is to raise your voices to the international community. Because if you do not submit your reports or you do not reach out to these mechanisms, then how are we going to get an accountability for all that's happening? So I won't take much longer, but I would like to add that as we focus on civil and political rights of women, we also focus on economic and cultural and social rights of women, which our office was doing for the last couple of years. And here, because, you know, human rights is universal, it cannot be divided. And we cannot say that this right is more important than the other. So as we focus on the civil and political rights, we also focus on the right to food, the right to health, reproductive and sexual health of the women, and to other economic and social rights that affect women one way or another. And by this, I would like to end my input. Thank you so much for listening to me, and thank you for having me again. And I hope that I was able to give you more of what the United Nations can offer and can provide to you at the level of support, whether by reaching out to human rights mechanisms or by providing activities, workshops, sessions in order to help you more and to raise more awareness on women's rights, especially in the conflict area in Syria. Thank you so much for you. Thank you for and by this I end my input. Thank you. Thank you, Reza.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you very much for all the information and the updates on the newly established mechanism. We hope for the best, of course, and from a Syrian woman, I highly appreciate the role the OHCHR office, Syria office is playing. I got the chance to cooperate with you on some projects, and actually it was a very rich experience, and of course the other international organizations here with us. I want to build on a point that you mentioned about, of course, you talked about different types of violations women are subjected to, and especially with when entering like the gender element or using the gender lenses, we sought to see each type of violations is somehow multi-layered because it brings together different social, cultural, economical, different elements into the table in relation to women. And you mentioned something about even like the enforced return for women from the neighboring countries or diaspora to Syria. Sometimes it's not by the government or by the Syrian government or by like any formal body, but sometimes by the men of the family themselves. It's sometimes related to re-explore how the situation is going inside, how safe it is. But sometimes, and I know from my experience, from my friends, some relatives, it's sometimes related to their properties inside Syria. And if they can access their properties, if they can sell or regain their own properties just to restart life again. So it is another type of violation that women are subjected to directly or indirectly. And we want to hear from you more, Marie, about the HLP rights and in this context, women's access to those rights and how sometimes women are being used or forced to face additional challenges in order to secure the family rights of their properties. So, to you.
Thank you, Razan. Thank you, Razan. Thank you, SNHR and FADL, for organizing this event and for inviting me to join this brilliant panel. And congratulations on the release of your very important report. It's great to see that women issues and women's rights are still at the front of the discussion. So I'm going to talk about a very specific issue. Thank you, Razan, for the transition, which is the challenges and the discrimination for women who have a husband who was forcibly disappeared, who return to their home area, so whether refugees or IDPs, and who want to claim their HLP rights. It's an overlooked issue, but it's very important because based on SNHR figures, it will affect tens of thousands of women because there are tens of thousands of men who have disappeared. And it's important to look at this issue because, well, it will have implication in the future for all these women. And it's a way to highlight the support that will be needed for women and how to promote women's rights related to house, land, and property, so which I will refer to as HLP from now. Sorry for the jargon for those who are not used to it. So this is an especially important topic because at the intersection of displacement and enforced disappearance emerges a unique vulnerability for women who claim to access, who want to claim their HLP rights as they return. I would like to insist that at the moment, there are very rare cases of women who have made this attempt, because as we said, few women have returned and have made this specific attempt when returning. So I will highlight the challenges and the procedure, but it's at the moment it's not generalized, let's say. So first of all, in terms of the number of discrimination and challenges to claim and make use of property for returning women with a missing relative, it's important to have in mind the legal framework. First of all, according to the Syrian law, women have HLP rights, but there is no provision in the Syrian law regarding joint ownership of marital assets, and only men's name appear on title of deeds. And that's the original difficulty for women to access their property. To give you an idea, only 4% of properties are registered under the name of women, according to figures published by NRC. So the first challenge at the very beginning, if a woman wants to claim her property when she's back, is the issue of missing documentation. So, you know, because of the conflict, because of displacements, the majority of Syrians are missing some basic documents. And while approximately 70% of refugees lack basic documentation, women will have 10% lower documentation than men. So that's the first discrimination.
I will pass quickly on the issue of cultural norms and inheritance, but that's also a big issue for women. It's seen as inappropriate in conservative communities for women to try to access their property or their inheritance from men, so that will be an obstacle. It will entail interacting with men who are outside from their inner circle, which can lead to harassment. And also women may face pressure from their in-laws not to try to get their husband's property. Another key issue is the cost of such a procedure. In one word, it's unaffordable for the majority of Syrian people. It's very difficult to give a standard price, but it will easily, the whole procedure will easily cost around $3,000 or $4,000. And you probably know that the average monthly salary for a civil servant in Syria at the moment is between $15 and $20. So it gives you the scale and how it's just a non-starter. So I will not overwhelm you with the details of the procedure, but basically the first step, and that's a key challenge as well, the first step to claim property is to obtain a death certificate for the husband to justify that he's not himself making the claim. So first of all, there is a huge emotional burden here. It means your husband is disappeared, you don't know if he's dead or alive, but you need to go to the authorities and obtain a certificate saying that your husband is dead. He's dead. So that's very difficult. Then the procedure itself is complicated and heavy. It involves, so I'll spare you the details, but it involves getting a police report. Then it goes to the public prosecutor. At this stage, another key obstacle is the necessity for a security clearance, because the public prosecutor, before issuing the death certificate, will require a security clearance for the woman. And that's also a major obstacle, because as the wife of a man who has disappeared, it's highly unlikely that you will obtain this security clearance. And also it's a problem in itself to go in front of authorities to ask for such a clearance because of the fear of interaction with security services. So let's say, so it's not technically impossible to obtain a death certificate, but it will require months, bribes, connection, and overcoming all the fear and obstacles I just described. Same for security clearance. A security clearance is also requested for the property itself, which adds another layer of complexity. And at this stage, the majority of women will just renounce making further steps to claim their property. Just for your information, the following step would be to claim inheritance. That's the only way to claim the property for a woman who has a husband who has disappeared. But since it's very theoretical right now, I will not go into the details of how you do that. But again, it involves being in touch with authorities, paying bribes, having connection. It's almost impossible. I would like to highlight another issue that was in the report that Fadel presented us, is the issue of confiscation of property. Because, well, there are many mechanisms, legal and administrative, in Syria to confiscate property of people who've been arrested, accused. So the counterterrorism law is the most famous one, but there are other ones. And most recently, some of you may have followed that last November, a new bill was passed, a new law was passed, which grants the presidency of the Council of Ministers the authority to manage assets that were confiscated during a financial ruling, a judicial ruling. So it means that authorities can transfer and allocate properties that have been confiscated to individuals who've been arrested or disappeared. So this is a new step, because this is really over now. It's basically impossible to retrieve a property with such a law, like if the authorities attribute the properties to someone else. So you see here all the difficulties and that will need to be addressed in a way or another to resolve the conflict to resolve the conflict. The final aspect I would like to highlight is the issue of restitution and compensation, because Syrians who've been displaced have a right to restitution and to compensation according to international law. And international standards guarantee the rights of women and girls to protection from discrimination and to equality in law and practice regarding restitution and compensation. So at the moment in Syria, there is no adequate system for restitution and compensation. There is no legal framework, and there is no reliable cadastral registry that would allow such a process. So as I said in the beginning, this will affect tens of thousands of people. So there is a need to put in place a simplified procedure that the one I described before, and for an effective mechanism to be created to address this key issue. And I would like to finish on a slightly more hopeful note, because I see this issue of restitution and compensation of house, land, and property as an opportunity to transform unequal structures in Syria. There is a need to reform the entire property ownership structure, including discriminatory laws, in line with the principle of gender equality, which is in the Syrian constitution. And a good starting point could be to introduce the concept of joint marital property. So this is absolutely essential to ensure a gender equal property in any restitution system in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marie, for turning the spotlight into that extremely important topic, because we all, as Syrians, women and men, we are all suffering from this issue related to properties and stuff like that till we lost hope, to be honest. So it is very important to keep talking about the subject and also brainstorming together for new ideas that fit within the current law, or can be let's say achieved within the current situation inside Syria. Of course, we're talking mainly about the government-controlled areas, the Syrian government-controlled areas, and the law applied there. So, Kathryne, everything we talked about today revolves around missing persons, their families, the effects of the effect of missing someone in the context of a conflict. And we know that missing persons are in the heart and the core of the ICMP work. And we would love to hear more from you and to build on what our colleagues have mentioned about your work now, your projects and vision for the future. And also, I don't know if there is any communication between the two mechanisms. It's very if you can elaborate more about that. And after that, of course, we will open the floor for questions. So
thank you, Rosa, and thank you, Ala, also for the very moving and very courageous presentation that you gave, which was very, very difficult. But I also want to thank Fadel, who's a good friend. I think I met him first in 2012 when he visited our headquarters, which was then in Sarajevo. A long time ago, because we started our work in the former Yugoslavia. So we met in 2012, and really tremendous success that you've had since that time. And congratulations on this report, which I really eagerly look forward to reading. And also thank you to Nicole, really amazing, passionate presentation. Yes, we work closely with OHCHR. I know our colleague Anne Massagin very well for, I don't know, 10 years. So it's very important, the establishment of the ICMP, and we're all going to be united behind it to make sure it works, because it has to work now. And thank you, Marie, also for highlighting the issues on HLP, because they are related, of course, to these missing persons cases. So just to give you an overview, Fadel has done excellent reporting. I think that's known, and I think he's done a fantastic job in tabulating or trying to tabulate the numbers of missing people. In the context of Syria, they are enormous, probably up to 200,000 people. So the numbers are huge, okay? And they're missing from a variety of circumstances, which Fadel has very clearly outlined in the presentation that he gave, including incommunicado detention, arbitrary detention, kidnapping. We have a colleague here from the White Helmets, from sarin gas attacks, where persons who were killed could not be identified, for example, from the day-to-day ravages of war and from other atrocities linked to war crimes, for sure, linked to war crimes and other atrocities, human rights abuses that have occurred now for over a decade. So the circumstances are varied, but they're not only missing inside Syria, they're also missing outside of Syria, because the misery of what's happening in Syria doesn't end at the border of Syria. It continues into Europe as Syrians flee Syria, get into boats that are not seaworthy, try to make the attempt of crossing the Mediterranean, where they die or where families are separated. So the magnitude of the missing persons process in the context of issue in the context of Syria is huge. There are also non-Syrians missing in the context of Syria, whether they were foreign fighters coming from about 60 different countries, many of whom have had children. Many of these children are now without their parents. They're in the Al-Haq prison. They're in other locations. So trying to deal with this is enormous. So the undertaking to find missing persons is going to be huge. And the ICMP, you know, which we're very happy exists, cannot on its own do this. So partnerships with other organizations, from obviously Syrian organizations, families of the missing, international organizations, NGOs, human rights organizations like Fadl's is going to be necessary. I mean, the key to this whole vision is cooperation. We must all cooperate together because what we're faced with is enormous. Now, the Syrian regime itself, let me just explain what would happen under normal circumstances. So given the level of atrocities that have been committed, the Syrian regime, of course, the Assad regime is, viewing this issue with criminal contempt. There have been no efforts on the part of the Syrian regime to conduct investigations into any cases. Now, under international law, we must note that the state is responsible not only for finding missing people, but for investigating their disappearances and ensuring that the rights, the human rights, as was noted by Nicole, that the human rights of families of the missing are secured. And those rights include justice, they include the truth, and they include reparations, compensation, which is difficult. So there are numerous rights that have to be secured, and we don't see any effort. In fact, it's only getting worse as the relations with Arab countries are normalized now with the Assad regime, with the cynicism, really criminal cynicism with which the Assad regime has treated this issue, including issuing these death certificates with the cause of death being in every single case a heart attack, with these laws that have just been created, which will make it more difficult for families to return, with the forcible return of the Arab neighboring states. So it's going to be hugely complicated, but it involves multiple states as well. So not only Syria, but also states that are hosting Syrian refugees, because data must be collected in these countries. And also there are Syrians missing in these countries. So not only in Europe, but also along the Mediterranean now has become a mass grave, effectively, because there are people coming from 85 different countries, including many Syrians, who are trying to get into Europe, and they're dying in an attempt to get there. They're being pushed back. So a number of European states must also take on the responsibility to conduct proper investigations into these disappearances, whether they're citizens or non-citizens. So these human rights standards, which must be applied in line with the rule of law. And I think that's a very important issue in here where we're talking about accountability. We're talking about judicially led investigations. Now, whether that will ever happen in a systematic way in Syria, it remains to be seen, but we're always optimistic, as I was telling you earlier, maybe one day things will change. For example, in the former Yugoslavia, where ICMP started its work, in Serbia itself, where a number of Kosovars were executed in 1999 and their bodies were buried in a freezer truck in Serbia, the regime changed. And eventually the judicial authorities in Serbia were responsible for conducting judicially led investigations into the atrocities committed by Serbia. So it can happen. And I think we hold out hope that these things can one day happen. So under normal circumstances, what happens? What do we mean by judicially led investigations? I mean, we're looking at MH17, for example. That's not a normal circumstance, but a plane was shot down. The Dutch government conducted its biggest investigation in Dutch history. That's a gold standard of investigations. Went to the crash site, crime scene, collected the evidence, and evidence was used now also for criminal trial purposes, also collecting DNA samples, which ICMP helped with. But doing this is a way a proper judicial process would work. Could this happen in Syria? That's our goal. So understanding that right now that is not possible, and how the IMP will deal with this, because the elephant in the room is the Syrian regime that has shown no political will be the challenge. So Fadil and I met recently in Istanbul, where we discussed how do you create a vision now together that the IMP will exist, but what is the vision? What is the strategy for dealing with the criminals that are still in power to get this information? So having said that, our mandate as ICMP, we're a treaty-based intergovernmental organization. We moved to The Hague in 2015, following a long existence starting in 1996 in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and where we worked in the region. What gives us hope in the Syrian context is that the governments in that region eventually took responsibility. There was an International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia that many of you know here that exists. And in the end, of the 40,000 people that disappeared, so that's a much lower number than Syria, very similar to what's happening in Ukraine, where we're also working today, which is already high. I'm happy to say that 70% have been accounted for, including almost 90% of the Muslim men and boys who were killed in a matter of days in Srebrenica, where we've helped the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina using DNA identify over 90% of those who went missing under the most difficult circumstances you can imagine. So it is possible that states take their responsibility, and using advanced technologies, this can happen. Now, just to back up, in the case of globally, okay, this is not just Syria, but globally, the majority of missing are men. They tend to be combatants, especially when we're dealing with war, when you're looking at human rights abuses, such as enforced disappearance, for example, whether you're looking at organized crime or migration. The majority tend to be men, okay? And this is most certainly the case in the Syrian context. We have to date, as other organizations have, because you can't work in Syria. I mean, in other words, the state has not taken responsibility, and our mandate is to ensure the responsibility of the state. But when the state doesn't take responsibility, we work with families of the missing, and we work with organizations like FADLs, human rights organizations. And like many other organizations, we've been collecting, or OHCHR, we've all been collecting data. We've all been doing things to lay the groundwork for a possible future where a systematic process can be engaged in to find missing persons. So to date, we've collected data from about 70,000 Syrian families of the missing, who have reported 27,000 missing persons. So this is something we need to link in your next report maybe and look at. According to this data, 4% of the persons reported missing are women. 4%. So that's really on the same trend that we see globally. So a lower number of missing persons are women, because the majority of missing are men, because they make up the majority of combatants. Or so we think. We have to look at this, okay? And in analyzing the data, I was telling you earlier about things that could be done in the future, and something the IMP should look at. The majority of persons who reported the disappearance, okay, meaning of the 70,000 persons who provided this information, were brothers. Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, when you think that the majority of missing are women, however, the majority of people that are reporting them are the brothers or men, something's wrong with this picture. And I think that gives us insight into many things. Number one, the people collecting the data should really be women. And I think we've made that mistake at ICMP. So, lesson learned. We really should ensure that there are more female-led organizations that are collecting data, so that women feel comfortable in providing this data to other women. But also culturally, and this is very important when we're talking about human rights, because we're talking about individual rights. So individual family members must make a decision about providing information, and that can still be challenging in patriarchal societies or conservative societies such as Syria. But I think this is important data that we need to analyze and look at. So the effects on women, I think, were very well highlighted by Marie. I mean, what does this mean? So when the majority of missing are men, and the majority of those whose human rights to justice, truth, and reparations have to be secured, how does that happen in reality? Okay, well, there's discrimination there as well, obviously. For example, when it comes to HLP or even custody of children, okay, if a woman, as was noted by Marie, if she doesn't have documentation to prove that the husband is alive or dead, and it's a painful, torturous thing to say that he's dead when he's not dead. In fact, he's missing. So there are areas, we've worked, many, many places around the world. And one thing, we put together a policy group of Syrian academics, families of the missing, who have analyzed Syrian legislation and have looked with the objective of looking at what a future Syria could look like. How could you improve that legislation? Very much in line with what you were saying. So one idea, for example, would be to create a certificate of absence so that women can claim rights with knowing that the man is absent. He's not dead, he's not alive, but that means he can claim rights. But currently that does not exist. So what tends to happen is that a woman is subjected to further discrimination because her children are taken away from her and they're given to the family of the husband in many cases because she has no rights. Her property is taken away from her. Her inheritance rights are taken away. So women survivors are really have no rights in this context. And this is not only in Syria, but in different parts of the world. So the impact on women survivors is huge. It's profound and is a factor, as we've noted, in return. Why would they want to return to a situation in which they're discriminated against? So this forcible return, in many cases, as we've noted, is sending them to their deaths or to a situation that is untenable, in which they cannot live, they cannot survive. So I think that's very clear. So how do you ensure that women survivors can secure their human rights, and especially the right to justice and to truth? So here, there is a conundrum, going back to what I said earlier, because being able to ensure that the Assad regime or others conduct reliable information or investigations into missing persons cases is not foreseen in the foreseeable future. It's going to be very complicated. But as was also noted, and Allah spoke very eloquently about this, women are also targeted. Okay, but that's a lower number of cases, I think, which Fadel was able to show, but it does happen. Now, when that happens, obviously, as you've noted, there's stigma, and there is underreporting of this because of the relationship to stigma. So, and I think also women are more reluctant to report the disappearance. The family members may also fear reprisals if they report the disappearance of a female member of the family. So even though at this point, the majority, as I said earlier, we've collected data from 70,000 families of the missing who've reported 27,000 missing persons. Of that number, 4% are women, and the majority of those who are collecting the data are the brothers. So there's likely an underreporting. I mean, so it must be more than 4%. And I think some of the figures that you've provided indicate that it could be, in fact, higher. And I wouldn't be surprised if it is, because women don't want to report that because they may have been subjected to sexual violence, rape, other gender-based violence while in prison, or there's the assumption that if they were in detention, even though that may not have happened, that it did happen, and thus the shame and the stigma attached to this. So, going forward, I think what needs to be happen, and I love the title of your report, Unshakable Voices, because you want to present success and you want to highlight the good things that are coming out of this. And I think one of the most remarkable stories is the creation of the ICMP, and the fact that women survivors went to the United Nations, met with Guterres, met with the senior echelon of the United Nations, and had the courage to demand their rights, and to, in the end, have this specialized institution created for Syria. So I think here, I mean, this is something that we can all work together on, because it's all we have at the moment. So we must work together to make sure this works. But that these female survivors, like Allah and others, have the courage to continue this fight, and to do so in the context of the United Nations, I think bodes well. But that will mean many, many things. This will mean that, and I'm sorry about my watch, I didn't turn off the notifications, that survivors, I mean, men and women, will need to work together across political lines, across conflict lines, to make this happen. And what we've seen at ICMP over the last 27 years is that this is more likely to happen than not. That's one of my colleagues leaving. I should have said, I have a lot of ICMP colleagues in the audience here who I'll introduce later. But I think what is important, as I said, is that survivors unite, whether it's those that are pro-Assad or anti-Assad, part of the opposition. We've seen this before in other places that we've worked. This is very, very hard to do. But we've seen women, for the most part, leading these efforts. It's because they're the women survivors. They see each other as mothers that share the same pain, that share the same problem. That would have to be a big first step. If these families of the missing, civil society can unite and show the way, that would be a big way forward. The second thing that needs to happen is that there needs to be a place, maybe it's a double IM, this is something that has to, a double IMP, that has to be considered by Syrian organizations and families of the missing. But there has to be a home for all the data that has been collected over the last decade. We've collected a lot of data, and SNHR has collected a lot of data, OHCHR, a lot of Syrian organizations have data. That data has to be stored in one place, in line with GDPR standards so that it's protected. When ICMP collects data from families, and I should say we've also collected genetic reference samples for DNA testing, mainly outside of Syria, because it would be very difficult to take those genetic samples outside of Syria to our laboratory here in the Netherlands. But it's very important to have a shared data system of some sort that, again, meets GDPR standards. But if the point of this is just to have a data bank or a genetic data bank, that's not going to work. And we've heard that term in many, many ways, in many circumstances. Data must be shared. You know, having data silos where different organizations have data and they don't share data is not going to work. The key to finding missing persons, especially when the number could be up to 200,000, and given that they're not only missing inside Syria, and those missing inside Syria are not only Syrians, given that they're also missing outside of Syria along migratory routes, there will need to be a comprehensive effort to share data. Speaking of outside of Syria, another important vision, let's say, in moving forward. So uniting families of the missing and civil society organizations across conflict and political lines, having a shared data system. There will be a need for the governments in the MENA region to also work together and beyond, meaning countries in Europe. So there needs to be some kind of intergovernmental process that includes Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, Egypt, Iraq, but also Germany, which is housing large numbers of Syrian refugees, the Netherlands, so that there is a strategy to work together. So that, because data needs to be collected not only inside Syria, but in other countries. So having a shared data system and ensuring the political will that these various actors can work together is very important. Another component of this is ensuring that international organizations, whether it's OHCHR and the IIMP, ICMP, also the International Committee for the Red Cross, UNHCR, UNDP. I mean, there are a lot of UNICEF. There are a lot of organizations that are holding data. So I think they also need to come together to share that data in a common space. So these are some of the measures I think that need to be looked at. Now, inside Syria, I should add what can be done inside Syria in terms of excavations, given that there is no political will on the part of the Syrian regime. I mean, we were discussing potentially with the white helmets, maybe this doesn't work. The SNHR is also working inside Syria. What can be done to document locations? So we also have about 100 forensic sites, also mass grave sites that have been reported to ICMP. Normally what we do, like we work in Ukraine, under normal circumstances, we would share that data with the government that's responsible for conducting the investigations. In this case, there is no one to share that data with because there is no responsible entity for conducting these excavations. But there are pockets in Syria, northeast Syria, northwest Syria, where maybe things can be done in these areas that because bodies have been excavated, the white helmets have found bodies here and there. So using grid coordinates to upload this data into that same database will be critical. Anyway, so these are some thoughts on the future going forward. But in this whole process, women have to continue because they've already started. And I think that's the remarkable thing about Syria. that I've seen that is not like other areas, maybe Ukraine, where women are taking a really big leading role. But in the case of Syria, women have to remain strong and committed to this issue. And that's asking a lot of them, especially somebody like Allah, who's been through what she's been through. But that courage and that stamina is going to be necessary to carry this through for the years to come. So I want to thank everyone else for the amazing contribution that they've given. And thank you, Fadel, again, for this good presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kathryne. Actually, I would not even try to summarize all the information that have been mentioned and provided today. So I will wrap up from my side and open the floor for questions. If you have any questions for our speakers, or if you have any feedback or input on the report itself, the floor is yours. And online also.
Yeah, just for the online.
First of all, thank you, everyone. This is so serious and so important. And I am Deborah Allen Rogers. I have a digital fluency lab here in The Hague, and I'm a member of the Humanity Hub, and it's called Find Out Why. We promote trustworthy sources online. My question, I think, to you, Kathryne, is when I hear data share, and I think about the digital future, it's the interoperability. I mean, the technology is changing so quickly. And I'm thinking about another comment about e-governance and e-citizenship in Estonia as an example, and a model for refugees who need to have documentation in the cloud. Are you working, and Marie as well, are you working in those contexts of the digital sort of changes that have happened in leaps and bounds in terms of e-governance and the ability to document ourselves through a citizenship program that exists and has been running in Finland and Estonia for 20 years, and not, in Finland longer than Estonia. But I just want to offer that in as an idea and a suggestion, a digital context. Thank you.
It's going to be brief. I'm not working in this context.
Yeah, no, we are, yeah. And we work with a variety of Syrian civil society organizations who are also collecting data, and that data has been collected inside Syria. So what we've put together is a data governance group that consists of these groups that are collecting data. It needs to be extended. Hopefully SNHR will also have some kind of data relationship. But that's a very important point. And because the organizations that we work with need to collect data to a standard. So we have our own data system capability, which we've used over the last 20 years. That's, really because of Srebrenica, this evolved. But making sure, at least in missing persons cases, because, for example, what Fadel is doing, he's collecting a lot of information, a lot of different types of information, which is hugely valuable, including the circumstances of the disappearance, but also other human rights violations. So what we're doing is that we're extrapolating this information to create a database that's just specific to finding someone. Okay, so we have very specific standards in what we do. But the circumstances of disappearance, that is linked to what, say, Fadel would do. So we have a data governance group. So it's not really e-data, I would say, but we have standards of data protection. So, for example, when we collect data from a family of the missing, so the 70,000, the pieces of data from 70,000 families of the missing, of which 500 are directly from families of the missing who provided reference samples. So it's not just news reports, we get those, but the data we're collecting is directly from a family of the missing. So when we do this, we engage in a bilateral relationship with the family of the missing, so that they understand. You don't just go and collect data. First there has to be an educational program about why you're collecting data, what is the use of the data, does the family want to share it with a third party, for example, like the IIIM, or a court operating under universal jurisdiction. So the families are always in the driver's seat, and they know that their data is protected, and we're only holding their data. So the data never belongs to us. It always belongs to the families of the missing. And if they want to have it back, they can have it back. So that's our data. So we have various partnerships, one bilateral with families of the missing, another one, through arrangements with a Syrian civil society organization that is collecting data from families of the missing. And that is monitored through a data governance group, which we need to extend.
All right, that's very helpful. Thank you for that, because that does shed a lot of light on how this is going to go forward, because the data is going to be very instrumental in terms of evidence gathering, because to prosecute, you need the evidence. I just wanted to say to you, the idea of you going forward in your life with your children, and people at different times in your life won't believe you that you went through what you went through. We believe you. So there are many who will always believe you. And so just want to offer that.
Thank you so much. First of all, to all of you, it's been a very insightful discussion. The IIMP has been mentioned a couple of times, so I wanted to introduce myself. I'm part of the startup team for the IIMP. I work specifically as a gender advisor and also dealing with the component of providing support to families and survivors. So first of all, there has been so many suggestions and recommendations, which I took careful note of. So thank you for all of that, and I will chase you perhaps right after to expand on those. I'm quite greedy on that front, but I just wanted to kind of highlight a little bit of the gender components as well, because that's quite an important part of the IIMP. I mean, the IIMP is unprecedented in what Nicole highlighted, that it's an institution, a UN-created institution dealing with the phenomena of missing persons for a specific geographic location. But indeed, the structural component of participation of victims and families and survivors is also quite unprecedented, and we're also really making sure that this participation is really done in a meaningful manner, and that it's really in all of the works aspects of the institution. But on gender inclusivity, the terms of reference have actually been published in December, and they kind of illustrate and expand a little bit on that component, but gender inclusivity is one of the guiding principles for the work of the IIMP. And I personally am working on recommendations on how to translate that into action, because it being a principle is really nice, but how do we make it work? And not just from us, the perspective of non-Syrians, but also from the various different perspectives of Syrian groups, which of course are not uniform, and there are different needs to enable their participation and engagement with the IIMP in the different components, so the search and the support. So we're really working on that. But another thing that really is highlighted in the resolution and the terms of references is the continued, of course, engagement with women's rights organization, which we are constantly doing. So we didn't really stop at the moment of the adoption of the terms of reference. We're continuing to engage, of course, now to develop those recommendations that we are working on different themes, one of them being the gender inclusivity. And finally, gender analysis is also set out in the terms of reference, not just looking at women's experiences, but also the experience of men who have gone missing, and the gender differentiated reasons for going missing as well, which is quite important. It can inform the search process. It can also highlight the structural gender discrimination that could drive disappearances also to start with. Just to put that out there, happy to engage on any front relating to the IIMP, but Nicole has done such a wonderful job, so no need also for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Congratulations to SNHR on this new report, and to the whole panel for your wonderful and very insightful contributions. My name is Mink Lambers. I work at Dutch MFA as a policy officer on Syria. I have a few questions, if I may. First one to Fadel on the report. You mentioned the many interviews you conducted. So I wonder if you can elaborate a bit on that. Where do you find these women who experience these horrible experiences? Also very much related to what was mentioned a few times, also by Kathryne, the stigma. Also, how do you deal with maybe women not wanting to talk, or with the risk of re-experiencing the trauma? So I wonder if you can elaborate a bit on that. And then on the IIMP. Nicole, you also mentioned that one of the streams of work of the IIMP is next to clarifying the fate and whereabouts of the persons, also giving support. So related to my previous question, will it also include mental MHPSS, so mental and psychological support? So yes, okay, that's already an answer to the question. Okay, perfect. Yeah.
On the ground, if it was possible
Yeah.
for us to do so. So, yeah.
Okay, that's wonderful. And then maybe to stay with the IIMP, Kathryne, you mentioned the data, the need to collect it in one place. Do you also see a role here for the IIIM, so the UN mechanism, which is
We work with the IIIM. So I mean, as many other organizations, we're sharing data between each other. So yeah. So I think just that, how to do that when it's specific to missing persons cases, though, will be, it's not a challenge, but I think it's something that has to be really discussed with Syrian organizations and families of the missing, so they completely understand what's happening. And as I said, not only inside Syria, but also the many governments outside of Syria that are also holding that. We're working very closely with the Greek authorities following the shipwreck off the coast of Pylos. Because we have such a large amount of data from Syrian families of the missing, we've helped the Greek authorities make identifications of Syrians that have gone missing. So this data will have multiple purposes, and they may be easier to find now, sadly, than those inside Syria for the reasons I mentioned.
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. And yeah, sure, for that, we conducted, if we are able to meet in person, that's the preferable one. We have team inside Syria, team in Turkey. We try to meet, but sometimes, or the most of the time, it's difficult due to many challenging, mainly the security issue. Otherwise, we have, I can say, a very hard and harsh also procedure, how those interviews will be conducted. And we have the code of conduct. We have this interviews question and experience, up to which level we can continue at the same session. And we have this sensitivity and feeling that here we need to stop and maybe postpone the victims and the woman, and there is sensitivity and specialities when the victims is woman or are woman. So we have all of those years of experience how to deal with those interviews, and how we take the information, up to which level we need to stop and maybe postponed if the victims decided to no longer need to continue this her right. The most, I think, challenging things is which part from the interviews will be selected to be public. That's very difficult and key issue here. Sometimes we are even cut information, maybe essential one, but we need to protect the victim's location, identity, and all of that. So, and sometimes we are getting like maybe criticism because of that. We are aware about, and we can include more information, but always security is high priority in our organization. We have very high level of protection, because like we are documenting all parties and no one is like us. So we need to take care about that. We met with those ladies mainly remotely, and even if it's remotely, we used to take a high level of security measures. And here I should thank my colleague Khalid. He's the head of our IT department, and he's taking care of the security of the team, first of all, and who's the team is dealing with. And he's always make my life and our life complicated and difficult. So thank you very much, Khalid.
We have any people online? If anyone wants to
There's no
ask any questions.
We can wrap up.
We can wrap up. And so thank you very much for your presence here, for making the time to be with us. Thank you all, ladies, Ala and Fadl, of course. The minority. And we hope, I truly hope to meet with you all again, like with some, in a better situation. It's been a very long and painful 14 years. And yeah, we wish and we will push for a good end. Fadl?
Thank you very much. And the report will be published next few days on our website publicly. Thanks again for coming, for your participation. I don't want to forget also our behind scene colleague Rafat and Abdullah. Rafat is here. Thank you very much for your effort for organizing all of that. Abdullah is unable to join due to the visa issue, and I would like also to thank my colleague Rawan. And yeah, please enjoy the coffee and the tea. Thanks.